note for a country that seeks to industrialize itself. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Majority.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And may also note, Honorable Speaker, that I've known the Honorable Kinanjui for quite some time, since he was a member of Parliament, and he's been a friend. That will not deter me from vetting him. And CS nominee, I want to know, from where I sit, we see a lot of disharmony, or there being lack of harmonization of what is seen to be government policy in the Ministry, especially of Industry, and what happens in practice. And because we seem to be having a protectionist policy in the Ministry, especially around local manufacturers. And I have in mind the specific case of the steel and cement industries, where policy has been seen to be protecting local manufacturers, those who have invested heavily in the industry. But at the same time, in practice, the ministry also proposes certain other legislative measures that negate the policies that you espouse. What do you intend to do, should you be approved, to harmonize both policy and legislation? And I say that because specifically on cement and steel, for instance, we want to encourage the growth of local industry in the steel sector with heavy investments by particular players in the country. But legislation then comes to Parliament that in a way is also killing small industrialists. And you find that you are protecting the very big industrial setups, but also killing cottage industries. Look at the people who are smelting the scrap metal you're talking about, and those who are processing iron ore to steel. Look at those who are manufacturing mabati, iron sheets, and wire rods. And the legislation around it, and what the ministry espouses as government policy. I therefore just want to hear what your views are on a protectionist policy in government of industry vis-a-vis the encouragement of young and nascent cottage industries in the country. Because big industries, yes, create jobs, but also the cottage industries probably create much more jobs than those big, very big mega industries. Just your views on that, CS nominee, and how you will harmonize both policy and legislation.
Junet, Lee will take several so that you can answer them together. Junet, you will skip posing.
Thank you, Chairman. Honorable Chairman, there's something notable about nominees from Nakuru, which I want to bring to the attention of the nominee. We have vetted 3 people from, this is the 3rd person from Nakuru, Honorable Chairman. We are vetting in less than 2 years, or 2 years exactly. And at the moment we vet somebody, and I want Honorable Kinanjui to know this, when we finish vetting that person, we approve. Then 1 month down the line, if you ask who is the minister for ICT, nobody remembered her. I'm telling you. Nobody even remembered whether there was a minister of ICT. Then the first man who went to lands, there was a problem. So Honorable Kinanjui, are you going to be part of the same? Was that a fate? But my question is, Honorable Kinanjui, this idea of economic zones has been criticized by some critics and given a proposal, which I want to know what is your thinking about it. They are saying, rather than having those economic zones in counties, that you as a minister now coming for industrialization, that you don't focus on that. What you do, you focus on economic niche of counties. Fund some budget for specific counties and develop that economic niche. And they give examples, like for example in Turkana, there's oil. So if there was money, you develop that economic niche for Turkana, we'll develop a country from that point, and it will actually contribute to our economy. West Pokot is mining. I can assure you that. There's a lot of minerals in West Pokot. So rather than doing these economic zones, why don't you find money and develop that economic niche? Tourism, Narok, and then also maize in, for example, Kitale. What do you think about people who think like that, rather than just having these white elephants, in my view, called economic zones without actual economy? Thank you, Chairman.
Honorable Lee, as a student of literature, you've always expressed that literature on your online platform, and most of it actually fairly has been, in the last few months, has been very critical on this administration. Number two, your party Ubuntu had its manifesto. Now you're joining, assuming this committee approves you, you will be joining the Kenya Kwanza government, which has also its manifesto. How do you want to use, how do you think you will work with this administration, considering that you've been extremely critical of this administration and its policies, and now you have to sit with the same team that you've criticized and used words against? Thank you.
Chairman, I don't have any question.
Okay.
I just want to assure Posing that the fears of Nakuru now will be sorted. I hope that the positive development...
Lee, you can proceed to answer questions. Posing is not being vetted here.
So thank you, Chair. Allow me to start with the Honorable Koech and to say that I have used my knowledge sometimes to be critical of the administration, but I also want to correct. There's a difference between being critical of policies and being critical of a government. If, for example, we say pending bills are affecting businesses, that is not an affront on a government. It is a plea from the business community to try and ease cash flows so that businesses don't fail. If we say taxation beyond a certain point can stifle growth, that is not criticism. It is actually positive criticism, so that if you take it, then everybody is a winner, from the government to the citizens and all that. And I think it's really important for us to also embrace that even when you're in office, including myself, it is not possible that I'm the only one with ideas. There'll be people from out there who will think I can do something better, and the right thing is to give them that avenue, and possibly, if they have better ideas than myself, also to listen to them. And I think personally I consider that as my role as a patriotic citizen. Whenever I see something that I think is not right, to raise it, and possibly hope that the policy makers, whether in parliament or in the executive, can also take it up. With respect to a political party, it is true I have formally resigned from Ubuntu, but my heart is also very connected to the Ubuntu philosophy, which simply talks about I am because you are. And therefore also in government, whatever policies we make must not just be about me, myself, and I. There is a bigger community beyond yourself. And I think really this is what we need to really get out there. When you see poverty out there, is not something we can ignore. And I think the opportunity to work in government also means my thoughts, I will share them to colleagues through parliament, also to the president, and give the best advice that I consider necessary for the country. The Honorable Kosing, he has said that nominations from Nakuru, I am not aware. I still remember those two gentlemen. I'm not the appointing authority, and therefore would hate to discuss
Point
them
of order.
in their absence.
Chairman, was it gentlemen?
A
And a
gentleman and a lady. You don't know your citizens in your former jurisdiction.
Gentleman and lady.
Yes.
And I think maybe also what is important is that even when a new person like myself comes, it's not a very good tradition to belittle anybody else who's been there before you. I think acknowledge whatever contribution they've made, whether big or small.
Actually, it was just a preamble to a question. Don't belabor that. Answer the
Well said.
the relevant
With respect
question.
to the economic zones, I think every county has a story. If you go to Pokot, you know, I mean, the situation will be very different from Mombasa. If you go to Makwiny compared to Nakuru, therefore, to make a generic template for all the counties may not be right. And I think therefore some of the considerations we need to make is to look at the economic opportunities existing at every place and ensuring that the economic zones we are creating are responsive to the needs of that particular place. For example, in the pastoralist areas, the issue of beef and cattle and lamb is really in huge demand, especially in the Middle East. So we don't need to go competing with other places that could do horticulture. So how can we empower areas like Isiolo and some of those places, Kajiado, Samburu, and the other places, so that they become our best practice examples when it comes to bee farming and these other things. So I think it is true that there's a need to rationalize, and I think more importantly also is to, some of these counties are very close to each other. So sometimes to have sufficient raw materials to run all these economic zones may be a challenge in future. Therefore, the need to rationalize and also ensure that we prepare the public. The issue of it turning out to be white elephant is not particularly new in Kenya, where government invests millions and millions of shillings, and I've seen it even when I was in infrastructure. We are told at a certain point there are very many accidents. We go and budget for a footbridge, and nobody ever uses that footbridge, in spite of all the money being pumped there. So there is a need for us to educate the public, in this case, the investors, so that they know what is coming up, where there are challenges of funding. We can look for linkages with banks, including banks that are funded by government, to ensure that there's a close-knit loop. And I think that should be going on now, so that by the time these special economic zones are complete, then you have uptick. And I also want to say that sometimes you have these special economic zones, they are here, but the investments by the local, the indigenous Kenyans, has remained low. So we want to see locals also take advantage of these existing facilities. And lastly, to also confirm that in the past, we have had some of these allocations to companies or persons who are not serious to take up these opportunities. And therefore, they are purely there for speculation. Maybe it's an area within the allocation team that we must make sure that those who are given the opportunity indeed are ready to hit the road running. Lastly, the majority leader, the Honorable Ichungwa, talked about disharmony in government policy. And I don't think this is a light matter, because on one hand, we've been trying to discourage imports. And I want to give the example of the import duty that had been slapped of about 1.5% on luxurious goods, some of those things that we didn't require. But it was removed. So on one side, we say we are protecting, but when you go to our supermarkets, 80% of the things come from outside, including toothpicks. So that is not consistent with a nation that says they want to industrialize. So I think there's a need both for government, the legislation, and also the national intelligence, because part of this legislation we pass has very serious impact on the nation's economic outlook. We are talking of a balance of payment deficit that is growing by the year. So for us to be able to overcome this, it will be extremely important that we harmonize our approach and ensure that everybody understands the implication of every single policy that we put and what it means to the larger national interest. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry.
I forgot to mention on cement, which I think is also a big issue. The President has pronounced himself on the issue of affordable housing, and it is obvious that affordable housing cannot be restricted only to the government projects. It also means that if I want to build myself a house, it is within the affordable agenda platform. But the cost of cement and steel has gone up by approximately around 30% in the last 2 years. And I think that can be attributed to some of the monopolistic regulations that were brought during the same period. And therefore, once vetted and finally approved, our first duty will be to try and get up a team to interrogate the impact of some of these policies and whether they are for the benefit of the country or they are reversal to the gains that we already had. The issue of cartels within the industry is also very important, and again there has been mention of quality, and therefore KEBS and other regulatory agencies will be empowered to ensure that indeed we live up to our duty. Thank you.
Honorable Speaker, if you allow me, just one follow-up question in relation to that, the same question I'd asked. Because CS nominee, what I would really want to hear, 20 years ago, the Kenyan state was the leader in manufacturing in the region. As of 2023, statistics are showing us that Uganda has now overtaken Kenya. The contribution to our GDP of manufacturing in Uganda is, as of 2023, was at 15.65%, while Kenyans has stagnated at about 7.6% as of 2023. And 20 years ago, Ugandans, Tanzanians, Burundians, Rwandese, all the way to Congo, people are importing things from Kenya. What is it that you intend to do as a Minister for Trade and Industry to get us back to where we were at least 20 years ago, if not anything else? Because, and I agree with you, it is these protectionist policies that in a way are negating those gains. If you go to Uganda, it's not very big mega industries that are growing that contribution of manufacturing to GDP. It's small industries. But those are the small industries we are killing in Kenya. What will you specifically do to ensure that as you harmonize policies and legislation, you also encourage small cottage industries to grow in the country and take us back to that position where we were the leader in the region?
Thank you.
Yes, Master.
Thank you. Just to build on to what majority leader said, nominee, it's not just about aligning Kenya's trade and industrial policies to the legislation. It's also about aligning all that to sustainable development goals, because that is what will guarantee that we continue to industrialize, that these industries continue to thrive and grow and expand. So those specific initiatives or plans or action plans that we intend to undertake, I think that's what we want to hear from you.
And maybe to guide you, CS nominee, for instance, we are signatories, and I see you are a consultant with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And having been a consultant, I don't know whether you still continue working as a consultant, but this African Continental Free Trade Agreement allows free access to markets of countries that have are signatories to this agreement, from Southern Africa, East and Central Africa. But then again, locally, we are signatories to that agreement, but then we have policies again that are negating the provisions of that agreement in terms of restricting the free entry of raw materials especially. And I have a case in mind of those two industries that I mentioned, clinker in cement and billet